Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. Today, we're talking about dissertations. So, dissertations, as in end of year thesis, either for undergraduate students, but crucially for postgraduate students. So, we will go through a set of organizational issues that have to do with how you can start your dissertation preparation, how you can start your organization, how you can start your writing. So we will do all this together to make sure that everybody starts on a good track. So I see we already have a few people on the stream. So this is, I think, useful experience for people to experience both live so we can interact. Remember that there's a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. So you can put messages there and you can say hi and I can respond to whatever you're saying. So this is both a useful experience for the people who are joining in live and also a useful experience to watch this in the replay that's going to be available after we finish today. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay and see me okay. And that makes a fun experience for all of you. A special invitation and a special hello to the students from the University of Westminster who are undertaking the task of doing masters in law dissertations starting right now, because we have finished now with all the exams and all the coursework as part of your normal modules, and we're launching on a summer of dissertation writing. So this session is specifically targeted to these students, many of whom are my own students, and I'm going to be involved in your supervision or arranging your supervision with other colleagues. So hopefully this is going to be a fun and interesting way to spend the summer together. And if you're looking forward to this, and if you're agitated about starting your dissertations, hit the like button so I know that you guys are full of energy and ready to go. Or if you're not, in case you're not full of energy and ready to go, just put a comment on the chat, so I know if there's something that we can do to get you guys up there and get everybody on. So without wasting any of your time, we're going to start straight ahead on some of the things that I wanted to cover with you today in this dissertation-specific live stream. Now, how to select a topic is something that I don't want to spend a great deal of time on because this we have discussed already. I already issued a video on the channel that talks about what is the best way to select a dissertation topic. If you're looking for that, I'm going to put a link down in the description for you so you can watch that again, or you can watch it for the first time if you haven't seen it already. Now, the students from the University of Westminster that are dealing with me specifically as part of what we do together at the university have already been invited to submit proposals. I had asked people to send these proposals for the 1st of April. Now, you might be wondering, if you're engaging in your dissertation journey, why is it necessary to send a proposal for your thesis early on? For people who have started their degree in September, perhaps it doesn't feel that early, but for the people who have started in January, it will look a little bit early. So having to come up with a topic and to submit a proposal for the dissertation already in April when you haven't yet finished your taught modules might seem a little bit too much. But I will explain the rationale behind doing this. The dissertation is something that will occupy a great deal of either your final year of study or your master's degree. So thinking about it early helps you to be sure that you're setting yourself on an achievable path. If you start thinking about topics for your dissertation when you have finished everything else and your summer has kicked in, it could be that then you spend 2 or 3 weeks trying to come together with a topic, understanding the basics, trying to organize yourself around the details of it, which then will bring you all the way into July. If you have to submit in September, if you're starting your dissertation preparation proper in July, you've only left yourselves 2 months. So that might not be enough time for you to do it comfortably. That's why I thought it's probably a better idea to, in a way, to force everybody to think about this early on. So then we can get a head start when it comes to the work over the summer. Especially now, this is especially important for September starters. I get this. If you started in January, you still don't have to submit your dissertation till January next year. However, the summer is the sort of dead, empty period that is best suited for you to work on your dissertation. So if you kind of finish all your coursework and exams and everything in May, and then you kind of set off on a holiday, and you come back in September, and then you have to do all your taught modules. You have to do the background prep for the dissertation. You have to do all your research and writing on top of having to sit in classes, on top of having to prepare coursework for your modules. You might find that this is too much work for it to be achievable. That's why I think both our September starters and our January starters will benefit from having the quiet period in the summer to work on their dissertations. Now, hopefully this communicates to you guys effectively and you can see the value in doing this. By the way, if you're January starters, put something in the chat box to say, yes, we started in January and we like to do this, or alternatively, we started in January and we think it's too early. I don't know. It could be that people can legitimately disagree with me on this one. But in any event, for the programs that we're involved in together, we have already started having these discussions, and we already started thinking about topics, how to put these together to a degree, and we're part of our way through the process. And what's also going to happen for the students that I'm directly involved in, we're going to have one-on-one dissertation supervision meetings going forward, so we can sort of solidify your progress and everybody gets to see what it is that we're doing together and how to best maximize the time that you've got available in the summer to progress in your dissertation. But let's get to the meat of this, because it could be that we've got other people on this stream today who are not currently my students, but are interested in taking a dissertation and would like to know a little bit more about this. How do you get started on your dissertation? So beyond the point of having selected a topic and having this topic approved and having a supervisor assigned to help you with this, what is it that you actually need to do? Let's start with with a little reflection on some research basics. Now, the whole point about a master's level dissertation, any dissertation or thesis, but specifically a master's level dissertation, is to engage in some original research. This means that you're going to have to produce a longer piece of work in a topic of your choosing. And you are going to do this by bringing in the literature. You discover what is the literature that is relevant to the topic. You make selections within that literature. You read and understand and incorporate all this, and then express it primarily in your own words in the thesis that you're putting together. So the key component and the key focal point of the process of writing a dissertation is specifically the idea of research. So research skills and the way that you express these research skills in the work that you do on your dissertation is going to be the number one thing that gets you marks at the end of this process. Now, students that are in a full-time program of study, or even those that are in a part-time program of study, will have been exposed to some research methodology classes or research skills classes. In certain institutions, these are an obligatory part of your degree. In certain other institutions, like we have at Westminster, they are offered, but they're not mandatory. So people have got the chance to engage in this and have a look at those classes. Even if they haven't been there live, they can actually have material that they can look afterwards. So bringing your research skills up to level is going to be important in you carrying out these tasks effectively. Now, let's think about this for a second. What does it mean to do legal research? Everybody has been given access to a set of legal databases through our library subscriptions. Now, if you don't have a library subscription, maybe you can do ad hoc registrations to various databases like Lexis or Westlaw or whatever, so you can get access to this material. But most of the students that are on a degree program will gain access to these things through their library. By the way, I've got kids in here that are about to go to school, so I'm going to say, have a nice day, and I will see you later. So yes. So this is the beauty of live streaming, ladies and gentlemen, is that you can find other people around the household that can participate in this process. In this case, teenage kids who will also be doing a dissertation or a longer piece of work at some point in their lives, and are going to be able to listen to the dad making this presentation on YouTube. So you see, that's the beauty. Give us a thumbs up if you think that this is if you wish your dad had done a dissertation video for you guys that you could watch in the future. Okay, no thumbs up. So nobody would like to have their dad offering a dissertation lecture. This is fine. This is fine. That's why you have me. So we do this together. All right. So thinking about your research skills and the process of research. The legal databases are important, but this will be specific to the people that are working in the domain of law and the people who are working in the domain of law on a black letter law subject. So those of you that are working on domestic legislation and are working on something that is very deeply statute-based, case-based, and so on, you will need to have access to those databases to get some of the key information that you need. This is going to be less relevant to our friends here who are international students that are doing perhaps a master's in international law, human rights, international banking, or some of the things that we're involved in together in any event. Now, if you're doing something international focused and something that it is a little bit broader than the specific domain of law, then you will not find a lot of stuff that are for use in Westlaw, Lexis, and all these relatively complicated legal databases. So for you, perhaps it is sufficient to rely on Google searches or specialized parts of Google, like Google Scholar, that can give you a more directed set of search results. Now, I do have some videos on research skills and how to use Google effectively and so on. So I'm going to put a link to those down in the description so you guys can watch them after the stream is over, or when you're watching on the live stream, you can also click on those and get this information. Also, there's an opportunity to use AI tools in order to give you access to resources or to suggest resources. Now, if you've got the version of ChatGPT that is connected to the internet, you can ask it to suggest resources, and then it will kind of think about what's available on the web and give you some suggestions. If you're using the offline version, the free version of ChatGPT, perhaps this isn't such a great idea because it's working from an old database. Therefore, it might not be able to give you up-to-date results. And also remember that ChatGPT is a text generation tool, meaning that it is great in making stuff up. So very often it will make up references that do not exist. So if you're using the free version of ChatGPT, be a little bit mindful of the results that it gives and always double check the resources before you stick them in your bibliography. Now, other AI tools, for instance, the integration of ChatGPT with Microsoft Bing is an excellent way to conduct research because you can discuss with it. You can give it questions that go beyond a mere set of keywords. You can give it something more elaborate, and then it will give you an answer, but also suggest the top 4 or 5 resources. And then it will discuss with you, attempting to elaborate on what you're asking. So you can actually use that functionality. So I'm talking about Microsoft Bing, the search engine that integrates ChatGPT. It can be used very effectively to create a more limited set and more manageable set of links and outcomes from a search than what you would get if you were simply going through Google searches. But if you think that this is too big a task, especially if you have selected a dissertation topic that you are interested in, but you don't know much about, you might have difficulty effectively utilizing both the search engines and the databases to get the relevant results. So what I recommend you do in that case is to start from the material that you've already been exposed to in the context of your study. So you've obviously taken some modules. These modules have kind of weekly classes, they've got weekly reading. Perhaps the topic that you selected for your dissertation connects to some degree with one of the modules that you've done with some of the weeks and the material that you've gone through in these modules. It's possible that this selected dissertation topic elaborates upon something that you did as coursework for one of your modules already. So if your starting point for the dissertation stems from something that you've been taught already, the most rational place to start would be to utilize the material that's been given to you in the context of your classes, or to utilize the research that you have done already in producing some other piece of coursework or dealing with some assessment. Now, this is very strange, but students very often seem to ignore everything that we've done together in class, and they launch on Google searches or other ways of retrieving material when they have to engage in some sort of assessment. And I don't get why this is happening, because the material that we recommend to you are supposed to be a starting point for further work. And they are material that we've checked, we've verified, we think they're useful, we think they're correct, and we give them to you as a starting point for your research. Therefore, you are perhaps creating a disadvantage for yourself by using Google searches as the first avenue to generate information instead of starting from the things that we've done together in class. So remember this. Thinking about the topic that you've selected for your dissertation, the best thing to do is to check how this links to modules that you have done already, or particular assessments or parts of modules. Then make a selection of the reading material that is relevant to that particular area and start from there. This reading material will often have suggestions for something else you can study. It will take you to something else. The things that you read will already have footnotes and a bibliography. So you can chase those footnotes and that bibliography for additional resources. So your research starts spreading out in kind of wider and wider circles. You start by something that is verified and true and correct and relevant to the subject, because this is something that we as experts in the area have selected for you. And then you start kind of moving out by chasing the bibliography of that source, the references of that source, and getting more and more sources. So then you generate the bulk of material that you need for your essay. When you have reached the limits of this, or the extent to which your question actually goes beyond the stuff that we've covered together, then you can extend further into doing some keyword searches through the databases or Google, or asking ChatGPT, or asking Microsoft Bing, and all the rest of it. And that way you can get the additional information that you need. One of the problems that I found that students are facing is that they are very often overwhelmed by material. And this can demoralize you, because if you're looking at an area that you're not very familiar with and you start doing general searches and that spews out hundreds of results, it becomes very time consuming and very difficult to shift those results and decide what is useful for you to write and what is not. So approaching your research in a structured manner and being careful about the way you go through it, I think can be good both for your motivation, developing your understanding of the subject, and also giving you a workload that is actually manageable and achievable in the time you have. So this is what I thought would be a good starting point. By any means, if you got any questions about this, feel free to put a question in the chat. If you're watching this not live but on the replay, then you can put questions down in the comments section, and then I will respond to those when I see them. So we can engage in a discussion, and you can actually let me know how it is that you are approaching these issues, because sometimes, from the perspective of the teacher, it could be that some things are obvious or they look easy, but from the perspective of the student or the candidate, it looks very different. So it would be very useful for me to know how you guys are experiencing this, so I can help provide the support that you need going forward. Yeah. Coffee break. This, by the way, is my favorite coffee mug. I got this from a trip to San Francisco. And these guys, it's a bakery, and they make the loveliest sourdough. I don't know. Anybody here from the United States, or if you've been to that side of the country and you've been to San Francisco, let me know. I'm definitely looking forward to going back there. Okay, so done with coffee and San Francisco and basic research skills, we can move on to the idea of actually writing this. A lot of the students on master's levels programs are here with us in the UK for a year only, in order to do this, and then they go back home. People do not speak English as their primary language, is not their mother tongue. And being able to write in English effectively is a task in itself. So we do not mark people for English. So if you're concerned about your language skills affecting your writing and affecting your mark, do not think about this in terms of us penalizing you because your English is not perfect. This is not what happens. But you should be concerned about difficulties with language, making it difficult for you to express yourselves appropriately and actually communicating in writing what you're trying to say. So your writing skills is something that is linked to your competence in the language, but it's also something that is linked to familiarity with doing longer pieces of work. I am very familiar that a great deal of my students actually don't have experience of doing long pieces of work as part of prior study. In many jurisdictions, the vast majority of students are examined by a sit-down end-of-year exam. So the idea of doing long pieces of coursework, like a thesis or a dissertation or something like this, will be unfamiliar to a lot of people because this is not something that they have done at any point as part of their undergraduate degree. So we are aware of this, and that's why we're putting some emphasis on people improving their writing skills. Now, what is the best way to do this, specifically if English is not your first language and you're a little bit concerned? If you're part of a taught degree, you have gotten to this level by doing various pieces of work and engaging in various assessments. Now, it is through those assessments that you've had the opportunity to develop your writing skills and get better in your expression. And crucially, you have received feedback on this, because we mark your assessments, we give you a mark, but we also give you feedback either on the paper itself, in kind of noting when you did well and where you did poorly, also giving you like a summary statement about where you think you went well or not, and how good your writing is and how it matches the learning outcomes that we set for every assessment. So if you're thinking about improving your writing skills, step number one will always be to revisit pieces of work that you've done already that have been marked by somebody, and then to go deep into the feedback that you received and see what they have to say about you. Now, the majority of the students do look at the feedback, no problem there, but I can see through the analytics that I've got for assessments that I'm in control of, that sometimes students have checked the mark, but they haven't clicked the thing to see the feedback. Now, I think you are creating a disadvantage for yourself if you don't access the feedback from your previous assignments. So even though it can, sometimes be a little bit of a scary process, especially if your mark wasn't very good, you're feeling a bit self-conscious, I think it is an essential part of your preparation for a longer piece of work to go through the feedback that you received on prior assessments. Now, sometimes we are a little bit rounded in our feedback. So we try to tell you that you haven't done well, but because we're trying not to offend or we're trying not to be too harsh, we sugarcoat this in language that does not effectively communicate. So I've created a video on this, a bit of an explainer on as to how the language that we've got actually might fail to communicate effectively, and what. So there's a video explanation of interpreting what your examiner has said and what they actually mean. So I'm going to put a link to that one as well down in the description for you guys, so you can have a look at that. Because sometimes when I say significant room for improvement, you shouldn't understand that you've done well and you could have done better. You should understand you've done pretty bad, and this is like important that you pay attention and you fix this, right? So when we say things like competent piece of work, it doesn't necessarily mean this is a good piece of work. It means this is a fairly poor piece of work. It's competent enough to pass, but don't tell anybody you did well. So it takes a bit of getting used to interpreting the language in the feedback as well. And that's what I was trying to do by having that video that can possibly help you guys. So let's recoup where we're at. When we're starting on a dissertation project, we need to think very carefully about our capability to conduct research. What does it mean to do research? What information we're looking for, where we can find this information, and once we engage in various searches, how do we cope with the results? How do we prioritize the results? How do we organize ourselves? A key component in producing a successful dissertation is working on your writing skills. So after you've researched, after you've collected your materials, after you read everything and understood what is going on, how do you actually go about expressing this in a matter that communicates effectively to your examiner? And remember that what is always getting marked is not you. When we're giving you a mark, we're not making an assessment of you as an individual and your value as a person. So try not to take things too personally and get offended if the mark is not what you were expecting. What we're marking is the piece of work that you gave us. Yes? And most of the time, of course, for dissertations, we know who you are, but most of the time for essay submissions, they're anonymous. So we don't even know who you are. We're just cleanly and strictly marking the piece of paper that we've got in front of us or on our screen in relation to the assessment requirements that we set. So when we're being critical of a piece of writing, we're being critical of that essay. We're not critical of you as an individual. So keep that in mind when you may come across comments that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So improving your writing skills is crucial in getting the marks that you need. We do have occasions where people have put in a tremendous amount of work and they've discovered the relevant literature and they dealt with that relevant literature, but because their writing skills and the language skills are a bit poor, they have difficulty expressing themselves effectively, so they don't get the best mark possible. So even though, as I said, we are not marking you on your language skills, I'm not running sort of English language courses, even though we don't do this, if the quality of your expression and the quality of your language obscures meaning and we don't understand what you're saying, then this will inevitably have an impact on your mark. Now, the final thing that I wanted to talk about today, and by the way, guys, for those of you that are watching this live, feel free to put comments in the chat, either to just say hi or to raise any issues of concern that you've got as we are starting our way to the dissertations. One of the final things that I wanted to talk about today is the idea of organization. This can be something that creates a significant amount of problems, and students keeping track of their resources, keeping track of their references, can become a very significant issue and can become something that takes a great deal of time that could be better spent in something else. And I wanted to raise this with you today because I think this is important to figure out early on. When you're starting on your topic, you've already done a proposal, you've already done a draft table of contents, you've written a little abstract for yourself, so you have narrowed down the topic you're working on, the area you're working in, and you've got an appreciation of a set of resources that are going to get you going, right? This is your starting point, and this is why I said earlier, we ask people to submit a dissertation proposal early on, so they've got, their ducks lined up and they've got things in order so they can start working properly on their dissertation. When you're at that initial stage, you've put together your title, your little abstract, you've got a draft table of contents, you've got a limited set of resources. You've got 5, 10, 15 things that you put in your evolving bibliography. You know what all these things are, you know where they are, you know what they're saying. But as your research develops, and then your 10 sources become 20, 30, 50, 100, 200, maybe they become 300, out of which you're only using 1/3. it's going to become very difficult to remember where everything is, what everybody says, what contribution each bit of it has made to your dissertation. And if you haven't been diligent with your record keeping and also by noting the references that come into your dissertation, you might find yourself in a position that you have done a great deal of writing and it's all very nice, it's very good, and it communicates very well, and it says the things that you wanted to say, but unfortunately, you don't know where this information is coming from. And this is going to be a very, very significant problem because we are very picky about you identifying your resources and where each piece of information is coming from. This is an obsession specifically in law schools and for law teachers, but it is something that is shared across humanities and social sciences and pretty much every piece of written work that you have produced. It is crucially important and it is a key component of the mark you're going to get to be able to identify the literature and the sources that contributed to you putting your essay together. So you need to do these things, and this is super important. And be mindful, I'm not talking about the referencing styles. If you want to know what Oscola is, if you want to know what Harvard, the referencing style is, and all the rest of it, I've got some links down in the description that you can look at later, right? But this isn't about style of citations. This is about the substance of making references. When you have gone from the 10, 20 sources to the 50, 100, 200, and all the rest of it, you need to keep an offline copy of all these resources. Do not assume that something that you can find online today is going to be there tomorrow. So you need to download an offline copy of the PDF that you're reading, do a printout of the web page you're accessing. And then you need a notepad when you keep a sort of log that says, I found this. Here's the bibliographical information. Here are the authors. Here's the name of the source. Here's the publisher. Here's the URL of the place where I found it online. So you need to do this for every source. That way, you have both saved an offline copy that will always be accessible to you, and you have kept the bibliographical information that will be necessary for you to construct your references. When you go to use these resources, when you're actually writing, you need to input that information right there and then. Even at the stage that you're writing your notes, if you say, here's some interesting stuff, I'm just going to copy paste some sections into my notes to use later, you need at that point to put something that says, this bit here has come from that resource. So you can find the reference to use in a footnote or in-text referencing later on. If you do this in a diligent manner from the beginning, keep the offline copies, keep them in a place where they're accessible, keep a log with all the bibliographical information, keep a note every time you're writing something in your own notes to indicate where the information is coming from, then the process of appropriately referencing your work is going to be super easy. Because every time that you take something that perhaps you copy pasted into your notes and you're incorporating it into something else, or you're paraphrasing it in your own words, or doing whatever, you will still be able to carry that reference through and say that now this information may be written in my own words, but this is where I got the information from. And you will be able to put that in the footnote below or in in-text references if you're using the Harvard system to indicate to your examiner that you can verify the origin of all your ideas in your dissertation. And please make a note of this, especially if you're new to writing longer pieces of work. It is essential that you reference everything. Every piece of information that is reflected into your essay, that you didn't come up with it yourself, but has come from another source. And I'm not talking about things that are directly copy-pasted. I'm talking about the information, even though it is written in your own words, if the information can be located in a page in a different book, or in an academic article, or in something that you saw online, if the information is someplace else, you need to have a reference in there saying where it came from. This is what it means to appropriately reference your sources. Every single bit, every idea, everything in your essay that can be traced to another source needs to have a reference in the footnote or in text or whatever style you're using. It needs to be there. Sometimes students are left with the idea that you only need the references if you're directly copy pasting something and you have it in quotation marks. No, you need the references for absolutely everything you're using. And since our primary work is in the domain of law, you will inevitably have references to legal material. It is essential that every time you say something is the law, that you carry with it the reference that validates this is in fact the law. Something is the law not because it makes sense or because you think so or because somebody told you. Something is the law because you can reference statutory information, some international treaty, some other legal instrument or a case. And this will have a specific citation that you will need to include in your sources every single time. So this, we've said before, and this is probably something that has come obvious to you as you were going through the process of creating coursework responses to the assessment questions that you had in your various modules. So the idea of being diligent with the references and also representing the literature through references in your work is something that you have gotten used to already. What I'm trying to highlight here is that doing a longer piece of work, like a dissertation that runs for 10, 12, 15,000 words, is the same task, but on a bigger level. And because, in fact, it is on a bigger level, the complexity of it increases and the possibility that you might be confused while you're doing it also increases. So diligence in organization is essential, and I would really recommend to everybody that you're super careful about the way that you're doing these things to be sure that the organizational aspects of your work do not come back and become a problem. If you want an easy example as to how it can be a problem, I've had students in the past who were not very diligent with the record keeping. They wrote the chapters of their dissertation beautifully, and then they set out to do the references, meaning that they had to then deconstruct every sentence and every paragraph and every page of the dissertation to try and remember or figure out where all this stuff came from. And the sad thing about this is that these people spend more time chasing references than it took them to actually write the stuff to begin with. So if you're mindful of this at the beginning and you're super diligent with organizational aspects and the sort of admin aspects of doing your work, it will be so much easier later when it comes to producing the final pieces of work. So hopefully this makes sense to everybody. If it does, hit the like button and tell me that you're finding this useful. If it doesn't, then we're probably going to have a chat, because the stuff about the references is not mandatory. It is not optional. It's very much mandatory. Okay, the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about today is your relationship with your supervisor. If you are a student that is engaging in a longer research project, everybody has been allocated the supervisor. I think the majority of the people in here today are people from the university, from Westminster, where we're doing dissertations at the moment. It's very likely that if you have come here to listen to me, I will be your allocated supervisor. So what we will do together is that we will have one-on-one meetings when necessary to discuss how you're getting along in your project, whether you are having appropriate resources, whether you are finding those resources, whether your topic is broad enough to cover the 12,000 words that you need to do, or whether we need to expand. Perhaps we need to have a discussion if your topic is too broad and you cannot actually cover all this stuff within the space that you've got available. And then once you get to the point that you're happy with your research, you're happy with the breadth of the topic, and you start getting into generating your material, and that is fine, then we can get into the issue of you actually writing. So what I would recommend in the way that you structure your contact with your supervisor, either me or somebody else, you are in regular contact with them. You've got some milestones or some things that you're trying to achieve, and you got checkpoints throughout the summer, so then they can monitor your progress and they can also help you when you're getting along. And we can also help you with your writing, and we can have a discussion about your expression, or if you're having difficulties with language or something like this, then how we can help you overcome these. And there are various tools, there are various things that we can do together, even if the difficulties you're facing are of a technical nature, like, for instance, expression, language, etc. What you don't want to do is to do everything yourself, or perhaps suffer in silence if you're having some difficulty and only get in contact with your supervisor at the very last minute, like a couple of weeks before submission. Be mindful that also over the summer, people might be on vacation. So you need to have a communication with the person that's supposed to help you as to their availability. And it's always a good idea to make appointments. If you have things to send them to review, that you send them early in advance for them to have the time to look at them properly and then return with some valuable feedback. The students who have engaged in a positive relationship of supervision have done much better at the end. The students who got in trouble are the people who were perhaps afraid to contact their supervisor and they were facing some difficulty, and that expressed itself in not great performance at the end. So I would encourage everybody to stick to the timelines that we've got and the anticipation of contact that we have. And every time that you're worried about something or you're facing some difficulty, to get in contact with either me or the person who's supervising you, so we can see what we can do to help. And always send samples of your writing so we can see how your work is developing. So what we're going to do going forward, tomorrow I already have some one-on-one meetings on location or on Zoom are organized with people. So we're going to start having these discussions. And then as we're progressing towards the summer, we will have the opportunity for more of those meetings. I don't intend to do another specific live stream for dissertation support, but I was thinking of putting together another video, especially to help you guys to repeat the information about the organizational skills and some of the technical aspects. So if you think that such a video would be useful, let me know in the comments. So I am looking forward to working with you guys in your dissertations over the summer. I've got high expectations because we had really nice topics submitted for the dissertation proposals. So I'm really looking forward to working on the research with you and seeing how it comes along and reading your writing. And thank you very much for joining us today for the live stream. Looking forward to seeing you in person soon. And thank you, and I'll see you next time.